Hello, everyone. I'm Karen MacNeil, author of The Wine Bible, and this is winespeed.com's People to Know, insider interviews with the most important and fascinating people in the wine business. And today we are so lucky and privileged to have Bart and Daphne Araujo joining us. The Araujos are owners of Napa Valley's Accendo Cellars, which they began in 2014 after selling for an undisclosed sum, their highly esteemed Araujo Estate and the iconic Eisele Vineyard to the Artemis Group, owners of Bordeaux's Château Latour. A San Francisco native, Bart Araujo attended the University of Southern California and then Harvard Business School before returning to California and founding a successful construction company in Santa Barbara. Daphne spent her high school years in Hawaii and later became a landscape architect. The Araujo's new brand, Accendo Cellars, is part of a modern winemaking facility and hospitality center they built also in the Napa Valley, along with Wheeler Farms. So Bart, as a young man, you had ambitions of becoming a Major League Baseball player, I understand. And Daphne, you for a time lived in very exotic places, Turkey, for example. How did you both come to wine?
We were casual wine drinkers, I would say, until we arrived in the Napa Valley and had the extreme fortune of acquiring the Eisele Vineyard. And an entirely new world opened up to us. Milton Barbara Eisele became another set of parents and extraordinary mentors and opened up our world to all of the icons of their era who became kind of guardian angels over the baby birds and made sure that we didn't do anything really terrible with this beautiful property we had. So Bob Mondavi and Joe Phelps and Bell and Barney Rhodes and Jack and Jamie Davies, and Tom and Martha May, Jack and Dolores Cakebread, all watched over us very carefully, gave us advice, guidance, and also opened up some amazing wines for us. And it was like, this was not like the wine that we'd ever tasted before. It was just like, oh my heavens. And this is the world that we have just come into. And it was an absolute inspiration, both from the standpoint of what was possible in the Napa Valley and what we could potentially aspire to. So it was very exciting. And I guess the wine that, well, I have to pick a couple of them. It's kind of a dead heat between the 1971 Ridge Eisele, the 1974 Calm Creek Eisele, and the 1975 Phelps Eisele. And it really underscored for us the importance of terroir, what great sites can produce. And it was amazing. And it's
is it safe, sorry to interrupt, Bart, but is it safe to say then, and I guess I'll throw this out to Daphne, is it safe to say that you didn't really know what you had? I mean, here you had the Eisele Vineyard, but you were beginning wine drinkers in some ways, or at least you'd never tasted the caliber of wines, I guess, that Bart just described.
Well, and the way that came about was, you're exactly right. We didn't really have any designs on having a winery and making wine. We had decided that we wanted to move back to Northern California, which is, as you mentioned, where Bart is from. And we wanted to live in the country, not the city. And along the way, we were invited to attend the Napa Valley wine auction in 1989. And we were so impressed with the people. They were so welcoming and so interesting and so hospitable. We decided that we wanted to look for a property in Napa Valley, but the idea was that we would own a vineyard to be part of the community, but not necessarily be in the wine business per se. So no, we didn't know what we were doing, we didn't know at all, but we were very fortunate right away to be recommended to Jean Phillips and her partner, Ran Harris. And they showed us a lot of properties, some vineyards, some with wineries, and we said, no, we don't want a winery, we just want a vineyard. And we did buy 2 vineyards through Jean and Ran. And at the close of the second one, Bart said to her, Jean, we're really happy with what we have, but if there were ever a chance to buy a vineyard that was part of Napa Valley's history, rather than having it go into sort of distant corporate hands, we'd love to have a chance. And it wasn't 2 months later that she called and said, the Eisele Vineyard is going to be for sale. Joseph Phelps has decided not to buy it, and I would like you two to have it.
Wow.
That was our guardian angel.
But Karen, the interesting,
Incredible.
so many interesting aspects of Eisele Vineyard, but one was we were self-acknowledged newbies. We didn't understand the wine business. I was trained in business, so I understood how to start businesses and run businesses. But the Eisele Vineyard attracted an extraordinary number of people, both on the viticultural and winemaking side, that wanted to work. They didn't want to work with us necessarily. They wanted to work with that property. And so ultimately, we were able to start out with a dream team of David Abreu in the vineyard and Tony Soder and Mia Klein in the winery. And so I can build business models. So the first thing I said was, I want to put together my 10-year business plan. And they filled in all the assumptions, you know, that were based on their experience. And again, very kindly most of the time, except Tony got a little cranky usually around harvest, but other than that, very kindly, they guided us and kept us focused on the essentials of how to deal with an iconic property. And we realized
Some
that
of the greatest names of Napa Valley, David Abreu, of course, a viticulturalist, Tony Soder and Mia Klein, consulting winemakers. That really was a dream team right off the bat.
And the Tony Soder connection really came about because of this magical dinner during the wine auction in 1989 that we had at Spotswood. And Beth Novak had kindly arranged for a full moon as we were sitting out having dinner that night, looking over the vineyard through the palm trees with the full moon coming in, and Kelly Novak, of course, just knocked it out of the park food-wise, and these Spotswood wines. I said, "Oh my heavens, who makes these wines? These wines are so classic. They're so unbelievable. This is the kind of wine we want to make." Tony Soder. And so and Tony finally agreed that he would come and assist us as well. So we got off to a very, very good start.
Wow. Well, and that story, thank you for sharing it, because it answers a question I've always had about why Joe Phelps didn't buy the Eisele Vineyard. He would have been seemingly in line because the original Eisele wines that Phelps made were legendary wines at their time in Napa Valley. Boy, he might have regretted that afterwards.
Well, Karen, I was sitting with Joe some years later at an event at his winery, and we had gotten to become very, very good friends. And as I mentioned, he was one of our really great mentors. And so he said, and you know, Joe was pretty quiet. He leaned over to me and he said, "Bart, you know, we just celebrated our 25th anniversary as a winery." I said, "I didn't realize that, Joe, but boy, that's fabulous. I mean, what an incredible track record you've had." And then he interrupts me, which is very unusual for me. He said, "And Bart, we decided to take the management team out to the coast to do a 3-day management retreat." And I said, "Yeah, that sounds like you, Joe." And he interrupts me again and he goes, "And Bart, at the end of those 3 days, we unanimously agreed that the worst mistake we made in our first 25 years was not buying your vineyard." So we don't know why, but there was obviously something internally at the time that caused them not to do that. But he ended up being such a great supporter of ours. He shared all 25 years or whatever number of years it was that they made the wine, from 1975 to 1991, with us. Craig Williams, the winemaker at the time, was just unbelievable. They were so wonderful. It was
Yeah.
very, very special.
It's
Here's a trivia one for you. Karen, here's a trivia one for you. I'm sorry. 1991 is the only vintage where there are two wines made from the same vineyard property. That was Phelps' last last vintage. Our first vintage, we harvested 4 rows at a time, because that's what you do, 4 rows. So it's all the fruit was identical, and it's all has to do with winemaking.
wow.
It's really fascinating to taste them side by side.
I bet that is a great little study in terroir, or the hand of the winemaker, and which can you sense first. I bet there are very few bottles left, though.
There are, but you know what? Maybe we should share that little tasting. You want to do that sometime?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm definitely ready. Well, Bart and Daphne, we want to talk about Accendo in a moment, but as a lead up, I have to say that, you know, not only the Eisele Vineyard, but the Araujo wines were, of course, renowned under your ownership and leadership. And over the years, you must have, a bit like you were when you were starting out, been approached by others saying, you know, if you'd ever like to sell, we're ready, we're in line. I'm wondering why you, in the end, decided to sell to Francois Pinault and the Artemis Group. I mean, they had Château Latour. They, you know, they were already well known, but why them?
Well, we had come to realize over the years that we were really not owners of the property. We were stewards. We were just kind of passing by. We had the honor and privilege to be able to live and work on this amazing property, as did people before us, and there would probably be people after us. And that the most important thing for us was to make sure, if and when that property changed hands, whether it was within our family or not, that it went to someone who was eminently qualified to take it to the next level. That was our goal. We, as you kind of guessed, we over the years, we had many overtures for the property. And quite frankly, none we felt were perfect. And then all of a sudden, through an intermediary, comes out of the blue, this overture from Château Latour. And we're going, oh, you know, perfect buyer, wrong time.
Yeah.
And then, so, you know, I mean, centuries of winemaking experience, organic and biodynamic farming, you know, financial wherewithal, just all the boxes were checked. And Frédéric Angereux, who ran Latour for Mr. Pinault, was in California. He loved California, he loved Napa Valley, and was here 3, 4 or more times a year. So it was an amazing connection. They were perfect. And in the end, we just said, and, you know, both of our children were still in Europe at the time. We weren't sure whether they were ever going to come back. That the property trumps our desire, and these are the best hands. These are the best hands that we can leave this property with.
My God, what an incredible story! And but I can feel the sincerity, not only of that, but I'm sure their sincerity. And yes, of course, Château Latour really understand how to take care of a great piece of ground. Well, let's talk about Accendo for a minute, because I suppose you could have decided to, you know, buy an enormous sailboat and just sail around the world the rest of the for the rest of time, but instead you created Accendo, which is a prestigious small winery in its own right in the Napa Valley, now a few years old. How is the wine different, do you think, from Araujo?
It's surprising to me, Karen, that after dealing with a single vineyard for so many years, 23 actually, we have been introduced to wines courtesy of Press Restaurant in St. Helena, who have quite an extraordinary cellar that they assembled by buying cellars from older residents of Napa Valley. We had wines from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And suddenly these wines were available on the wine list. And of course, all the wine people in the valley were showing up at Press and buying up these wines. And so many of the early ones were not single vineyard wines, but wines sourced from multiple vineyards.
Right.
And we were just so impressed with the purity and the style and definitely the longevity of these wines. And it sort of opened our eyes to the possibility that one could make a very fine wine from multiple vineyard sites. And it inspired us to consider doing that. So right off the bat, the wines are very different in their sourcing. On the other hand, it surprised all of us that the quality of the wines that we're producing, and mind you, we have the same winemaking team that we had most recently at Araujo. I was very surprised that these wines, we've had people taste the Accendo and say, wow, that really reminds me of Araujo.
Mm.
And I think it's the way we approach farming. Certainly the way our winemaking team thinks about ripeness and optimal ripeness, and the kind of wine we want to make hasn't changed. We're still striving to produce a wine of balance, integrity, purity. Sometimes I get in trouble for using the word elegance, but just a really fine wine. And so even though we have these different sources, the wines are, to our mind, very similar.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting set of statistics that I did, and I have to look at them because I can't believe these numbers. On the winemaking side, we work with Francois Péchon, Michel Roland, and Nigel Kinsman. Cumulatively, that's 71 years of winemaking experience with us, and they've been working in the Napa Valley for 100 years. Cumulatively, those three. On the farming side, we work with the Phelps family, with Mike Wolf, with the Bettinelli family, and the Silverado farming. 150 years of experience farming in Napa Valley. It's amazing. So we were able to bring a lot of wisdom and experience to the table with this project, and I just love those statistics.
And you didn't even count in your own cumulative experience.
We don't count. We want to have the important people.
I don't know. Well, as simply a drinker of those two wines, I would say that perhaps a word that Daphne just used about purity, a kind of a sense of immaculate farming and winemaking, certainly is an umbrella term that would encapsulate both of those wines and their styles. Why the name Accendo, by the way?
Oh boy, that was the most difficult part of starting a new business, was finding a name. And because we had to leave Araujo behind. Yes. And it ended up that we had gone through all of course, we had to go through all the botanical terms for Daphne. We went through all the astrological terms. We went through the Spanish dictionary, went through the French dictionary. And we were at our wit's end. Every time we find a great name, it was taken. And our intellectual property attorney actually got to the point where she wouldn't call me back. She would just send a little email saying, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. our wonderful assistant, Michelle Fisher, apparently was frustrated enough at our frustration that she, on one weekend, she just took out the Latin dictionary. And she found this name, and on Monday, she said, I think I found a name for you.
And it starts with an A.
Starts with an A and ends with an O. And Accendo. And well, what's it mean? It means to illuminate, to inflame, to inspire, and to arouse, if that's. So we just said, that's a wonderful theme. That's very exciting. And Chuck House, our longtime graphic artist, said, "Oh, it's perfect. It's even better than Araujo. I can do an even better label." Everyone was happy, even the graphic artist. So
I can see him saying that. Now, Accendo is, of course, the name of the wine, but you also have this beautiful and historic property called Wheeler Farms. It once was an old farm. Tell us the story. You could have just built a winery, called it Accendo, and be done with it. But you decided to also create this whole fabulous, very modern facility that other proprietors of different brands share. Tell us that story.
I guess the story starts with the Wheeler family who arrived in the Napa Valley in the mid-1800s. They started making wine on Zinfandel Lane, on the, when I think about this, the northeast corner of Zinfandel Lane and Highway 29 in 1880. And there's a few remnants of the rock walls of the winery still there on the corner. And the more we learned of the history of the Wheelers, we realized that, you know, they were the ones that established the history and of the property, which originally was 2,000 acres. And it seemed totally appropriate to honor them by naming the property for them. The other idea was we didn't want to just do a winery. We wanted to pay homage to the agricultural heritage of the Napa Valley and be able to share with visitors our fruit orchards and vegetable gardens and bees and chickens and all that. So it's very important to say that, you know, we're not a monoculture here. This is the agricultural heritage of the Napa Valley is much greater than that. So that's what we do.
That must have been fabulous for you too, Daphne, as a landscape architect, to begin to sort of see what an old property could be in its next evolution.
Well, having done that at the Araujo, the Eisele Vineyard, again, an historic vineyard, that we kept the name of the Eiseles on it, and just tried to bring it back to life with new grapevines, new gardens, new buildings. So this is quite similar in that regard. And it's like if you're designing a garden from scratch or inheriting one and trying to tease out the best parts of it and refining it. I have to give credit to Ron Lutzko, who is the lead landscape architect on that project, and a joy to work with. And really, Bart and I both, we noticed how people, when they came to visit us at the Eisele Vineyard, loved the land and everything, not just the grapes and the wine, but also the gardens and the chickens. And we realized that it's an experience, it's the way that we live and have lived since we first arrived in the valley. And our visitors have made it clear that not everybody lives that way, but they love seeing it, they love experiencing it. So we wanted to keep sharing that part of our lives. And so it's a combination of the wine and the food and the growing things. And
I know you're saying something deeply philosophical here, and I agree, but it is amazing what good little PR people chickens are, isn't it? I mean, this people like a little few chickens, and they really earn their.
Yeah, they do.
Well, you can't imagine how many visitors that we have, for example, when it's strawberry season. I've never tasted a strawberry, never taken a strawberry off the plant and had it. So go ahead, eat it. It's, oh, yeah. No,
That is, yeah.
and we just wanted the experience to be all inclusive rather than you just coming, you're just tasting wine and party.
Yeah.
And we also have a culinary center there and our own chefs so that we can take the bounty that's growing outside and then share it with everybody, either in a tasting or a lunch or a dinner as well. So it's all kind of fun.
Very, very much the circle of life idea. You both have such compelling memories of, the pioneers who really in the 50s, 60s, and 70s established the Napa Valley as one of the great wine regions of the world. I'm wondering if the wine business feels different to you today than it was when you began.
Karen, I think that so much has changed since we began in 1990. And obviously the people who were mentoring us had started in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's hard to think of anything in the world that hasn't changed. But I would say that it was a much smaller group at the time. There were, I think we were number 110 at the vintners, and now there are well over 500 members. Certainly, one could say that there is even more influx of visitors. The number of visitors has grown astronomically. And Napa is definitely on the map on the international stage. So that's changed, but I think that the passion of the people, whether they're brand new coming from some other walk of life or whether they're second or third generation people, there's still something about the valley that's completely captivating, and it touches people, which is a good thing because it makes our group pretty cohesive and coherent as it was back then.
And I think there's a misperception that ownership of wineries and vineyards in the Napa Valley has reverted significantly to corporate ownership. And our experience now, particularly with our two children who we induced to come back with their European spouses to California to take on this new venture with us, we found that, first of all, it's very exciting to have a multi-generational family business. That's really fun. But we're finding that there are so many, every time we look around, there's another family business. I mean, I mentioned Beth Novak before, and of course, she with her mother Mary were already established there. But then you know, Maya Della Valle with her mother Naoko, and it just goes on and on and on. There's a tremendous number of second generation and possibly third generation family members here that is surprisingly wonderful. So I really like that. And they're all getting, they all get together. They have their own little group. It's great.
You probably don't even want to know the stories they tell, but
No.
Yeah. As a last question, I wonder if each of you have a most memorable wine tasting experience just with each other.
Oh, you mean when only the two of us were there?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. I feel like we had, well, I mean, just for both there. What do you think?
Well, I'm thinking that, Karen, it's really hard because so many of the memorable experiences were done with groups. I'll just give you one example. Tom and Martha May invited us over for dinner, and it ended up that we had a vertical tasting of Stony Hill Chardonnays to start, and then a vertical of Heights Martha's after that with the main course. And it's like, holy moly. I mean, how many people And they all came from the May cellar, because they were friends with Eleanor McRae and all that way back when. And Joe Phelps has done similar things for us. And so it seems like, we have nice little times together, certainly Daphne and I, but I think the real blockbusters are when Belle and Barney, would take us to Hong Kong and have the baby birds just meet the movers and shakers from all over the world that came to what called at the time Wines of the Pacific Rim. I think they changed the name of it now. So unfortunately, we have some very romantic times together. Don't misunderstand me here. And we taste some pretty wonderful wines. But the real seminal experiences, I think, have been from our mentors.
Yes.
Certainly they were inspirational and aspirational on our part.
Yeah. You really see in that comment the communal aspect of wine and how important that communal aspect is. It's quite magical what can happen when even just 4 people get together over even a single great bottle of wine. Well,
Absolutely.
yeah.
We recently had an experience with our good friends Ann Colgan and Joe Wender. We were having an appropriately socially distanced dinner with them. And Joe decided at the end of the meal, he wanted to bring out a surprise wine, which we tasted. And it was a 100-year-old red Burgundy.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm sorry that I meant to actually look that up, but I'll send you the data on it. It was a producer we'd never heard of. And this wine looked beautiful. I mean, the color was unbelievable. It was totally fresh. I mean, we all just looked at each other in complete disbelief. So, there are those kinds of wonderful experiences that we have from time to time that are totally serendipitous.
Yeah. And when you have a bottle as special as that, you're glad really that more than one or even more than 2 people are getting to experience such extraordinariness. Well, Bart and Daphne, thank you so much for talking with me today, and thank you for listening. And please take a look at our complete interview with Bart and Daphne on winespeed.com's People to Know page. It's quite extraordinary. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'm Karen MacNeil.